Evening, everybody. Thanks very much for coming in. We hope you're all safe and well. Hello to Misty and Sarah, who's in the chat. Welcome to the first of three lives featuring haunted ships tonight. We're joined by Tabby Cat from she's part of our USA team. She's going to be telling us some stories about some of the ships that are docked over there that have got quite a wee bit of stories behind them. But first, I've got a little video to play for you. It's going to be going ahead of all our lives from now on. Sarah done it earlier on this evening, and we're pretty happy with it. So I thought I'd stick it up just now, just let you see it, and then we'll go on with the haunted ships. So bear with me, I'll find it, and we'll put it up. So that's going to be going ahead of all our lives from now on. That was Sarah doing that earlier on. She's quite good with the video. I'm thick as mince, but Sarah does all the kind of video stuff. So anyway, on with the show, haunted ships. Over to you, Kat. It's all yours.
Okay, good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on which area of the world you're sitting in. I'm Tabby Cat Gash. I'm based in Maryland, which is the east coast of the United States. And tonight I will be talking about a couple of ships in my area that have a very rich history and are also known to be haunted. And the first one is a ship called the USS Constellation. The US Constellation was originally commissioned in 1797. It was a frigate, approximately 176, sorry about that, my cat Fergus just said good afternoon, approximately 176 feet long, and it was built by the US Navy. And it was one of 6 ships originally commissioned to protect American shipping from what they referred to as marauding freebooters, or I think back then they were also known as either privateers or even pirates. And it had approximately 3 masts and 36 guns, which was kind of moderate. It wasn't overly packed with guns, but it was a very formidable ship based on the type of hulling that it was made out of. And it was also, being a frigate, it was extremely fast. And it earned the nickname the Yankee Racehorse. And over time, it was rebuilt as a sloop of war in 1853. And for approximately 100 years, the ship fought not only against the British, but it also fought against the French. It encountered numbers of pirates, slave traders, and even Barbary Coast corsairs. And it served in 5 major wars, all the way from the United States Civil War through World War II. It was finally retired in 1955 and permanently docked in Baltimore Harbor. For the longest time, it was one of the oldest, still continuously commissioned ships within the Navy. And over the many years that it's been docked in Baltimore, it's unfortunate that it has, over time, as most wooden ships do, eventually it started to come under decay and they've had numerous fundraisers throughout the years to try and raise money to rebuild it or repair it. Now, currently today, I don't know exactly how much of the original ship is still left, but
Mhm.
what they've done over the years is to maintain the integrity of the original build from the ship's building plans in order to make certain that it still looks virtually identical to what it did when it was first built. Now, over a period of time, um, it also gained the reputation for being haunted. And that was mostly because of not only the battles that it fought in and all the various different skirmishes, but also there were a number of different ghosts that are reputed. Now, a lot of it hasn't really been overly documented, but it's reputed to be haunted by certain ghosts, and even the most well-known of paranormal investigators, Hans Holzer, actually visited the ship, and he did so in the early 1960s, and he did a rather extensive investigation of the ship and came up with some interesting things. It was featured, that particular incident with Hans Holzer was featured on the Holzer Files, which is currently being aired on TV. And um, their guest host that was on there, not guest ghost, but guest host that was with them the night of that episode. A very good friend of mine, his name is Jim Jones. He lives in Catonsville. And I was very intrigued by that, and I contacted him afterwards, and I said, oh, hey, how about all these actual sightings and everything? I know that I personally have had encounters on that ship, and we exchanged, some things that had happened to both of us. But I just wanted to at least go on to tell you about the ones that are reputed to be there. I'm saying that simply because I haven't really found any documentation to state one way or another that yes, it is this person, or no, it's not this person. It's just the various different stories that's been handed down, plus the handful of reports from investigators that say they have audio evidence or video or film evidence to support the possibility of these particular hauntings. Now, one of them, his name was Neil Harvey, and in 1799, he was supposed to have been court-martialed for cowardice. He had left his assigned station at his gun, and this was during a battle of all things, and that's definitely a no-no. You don't leave your post. It doesn't make any difference what it is. You're not supposed to leave your post. And apparently what he had done was that he not only left his post, but he literally found a place to hide. And he was captured and being convicted as a coward and a traitor. The lieutenant in charge at the time, a Lieutenant Sterrett, he proceeded to punish him by sticking him with a sword. Now, there's also other reports that this particular person had been keel-hauled. And for those people who don't know what keel-hauling is, it means that a person is thrown over the side of a ship, attached to a line, and while the ship is moving, that person, their weight and the movement of the ship, they eventually end up going under the hull. And they'll slow down and let them come back up. They'll speed up and make them go back down under the.
We seem to have lost Cat. That was unexpected. Bear with me 2 seconds, folks. She did say she was having some Internet trouble. I think she's back.
Oh, there I am. I don't know. Something is going on with the internet today. A number of people have been having problems, and it's not just me. Maybe the spirits don't want me talking about them. But I'm going to do it anyway.
I thought you deserted me there, Carl. That actually
I
happened.
jumped ship. I jumped ship.
That actually happened last year. No, was it this one of the lives before? We had a guy from London, and what he did was we were talking away, and he pressed the button to look at the chat, and he cut himself totally off. So I was left with no guest and just talking marbles for about 10 minutes. And he was mailing me at the same time, saying, I don't know what I've done. I'm trying to get back in. But it was the longest 10 minutes in my life, because you're not prepared for it, you're not ready for it, and you're just kind of like sitting there on the top of a pole thinking, somebody actually asked me to sing, but I wouldn't inflict it upon any person. But you're back, so that's the main thing.
And I can't blame it on my cat. He's sitting right here. It's not his fault. Usually he'll come over and step on something, but he's sitting right here. I can't blame him.
The main thing is you're back.
Well, I think I was explaining what keel hauling was, and so there was a separate incident that says that this particular person was keel hauled, and once he got brought up, he had been mouthing off at him for some reason. And this is the one I don't really find all that believable. It sounds more like something a pirate ship would do rather than a commissioned navy. But supposedly because he had been mouthing off at them, they put him in front of a cannon and blew him apart. So supposedly Neil Harvey is one of these ghosts that's aboard the USS Constellation.
So the keel hauled him and then they blew him up.
Yeah. Evidently, after he got back up on board, he started mouthing off at him like, hey, is that all you got? Is that all you're going to do to me? And I said, no, let's do this. So I find that part of it a little bit difficult to believe. I don't think the U.S. Navy would do that. They're more likely to either hang you or shoot you, one or the other.
I know during the war and that over here, desertion, depending what was execution, you're put in front of a firing squad that you were hung, one or two. That's going back into the world wars. But I think, keel hauling somebody and then blowing them up because they answered back, I think that's a bit extreme. Yeah. So I'm on the fence with that one as well.
Yeah.
Just my opinion.
No, I agree with you, definitely. Now, another one is Captain Thomas Truxton, and he was an officer that had served in the Navy during the Revolutionary War, and he became the commander of the USS Constellation from 1798 to 1801, and he was quite a character, and he ended up even trying to run for president many years later. But according to most of the people that have been on board the ship, when they see a person in a uniform, especially a captain's uniform for that period of time, a naval captain, the first thing they think of is Captain Truxton, because he was one of the most celebrated, probably the most longest running ones at the time, even though it claims that he was only on the captain for 3 years. He apparently was one of the most well-noted and the most well-respected, and evidently they're just equating it with that. Now, me personally, it could be anybody. For all the many years that ship was commissioned, why wouldn't it be somebody else? A whole string of people that it could be. And let's face it, spirits don't always choose where they want to be. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they want to go back to a location that they feel comfortable with, or someplace that they just feel the most connected to. And for this gentleman in particular, to be seen all the time, to assume that this is that particular person that they're seeing, I'm a little suspect on that one as well. It could be anybody.
That's it. I mean, you think all the the people who served on that ship, maybe died on that ship, whatever.
Yeah.
But people just assume that it is this particular captain. Maybe as I always say in lives, it's always just my opinion. It might just be people's wishful thinking. Maybe they had a certain liking for this particular figure and thought, well, it must be him.
Yeah. Or it's just that you're on board a ship that was commissioned after the Revolutionary War.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing you're going to think of is a naval captain in that particular style of uniform, even though the ship was in commission long after that. And so it could have been any period of time, but the first thing people think of is, oh, it's a Revolutionary War ship. It's got to be this kind of person. That's got to be the uniform.
I just assume.
Yet the people have actually seen, now me personally, I'll talk about my experiences on that ship in a moment, but it just seems that it's kind of, without doing the research and really looking into it, because I did look into these people. I looked into the reports to see how many people had actually said, yes, indeed, it is this person. We've gotten this kind of evidence. And so far, I haven't found anything to substantiate any of the people that are claimed to be on that ship. Now, that's not to say they aren't. It's just that I haven't found any documentation for it. Yes. And this is the one that really gets me. Ships back then, for many, many years, even all the way up into the Civil War and even into Victorian time ships, they would have ship's boys. They would have young boys that would be indentured servants. They could just be unruly boys that their fathers wanted to teach them a lesson and had them carted off to a ship somewhere because they wanted them off their hands, sort of thing. These young boys were worked to the bone. And it's a sad thing to say that a lot of these boys were most likely abused by the people on board those ships, especially if you're gone for months. There's just no doubt about it. So for all of the stories on these ships to say, oh, there has to be at least one little boy that walks the ship, whether he fell from a mast somewhere, or he fell overboard, or he was found murdered, or something like that. Well, the Constellations got one too. They've got a little supposed 10 or 11-year-old boy that was supposedly murdered by getting stabbed to death. And this is one of the ones that was supposed to have been documented by Hans Holzer and his psychic at the time. So that one, there's a possibility. I don't doubt that one at all. And because it's a shame, it's a well-known fact. These boys were abused badly, and when something like that happens, of course, that tortured spirit is going to be there. There's no doubt about it. So it's very sad.
It's still going to linger. As you say, I mean, these guys were at sea for months, whatever. So I would say the chance of them being abused were very, very, very high, But just to tell you guys, just to get back to what you were saying about research, you need to do your research. Research is really important. There's too many people out there that just assume something, but you have to do, if you're going to talk about something or write something, you have to do your research to make sure you get it as close to the truth as possible.
Yes.
And I know you like doing your research. It's good, which is really, really good. Anyway, sorry for butting in. Carry on, my dear. It's all yours.
Hey, you're the big wig there, so interrupt me if you want. That's okay.
Right away.
Well, I was just going to talk briefly about my experiences aboard the Constellation. I had visited there, I think, like 3 times, and all 3 times that I went onto the ship, I don't think that I was on there but just a few moments when I could pick up. Being a medium, it wasn't difficult for me to do that. And I didn't really pick up so much on the main deck as when I went down below. And below deck was what I would call sad. I didn't get any sense of impending doom or horror or violence or anything like that. Just a very, very deep sadness that I felt. And I was walking toward the captain's area. And it's amazing that how small it is. You look at ships today and all the thousands of people that are on board these ships now. But when you go on board a ship that's only 170 some feet long, but that's from right the tip of the bowsprit to the back of, to the stern of the boat. So when it's curved like that, the entire bottom half isn't 176 feet. It's considerably smaller. But that's where the cargo was and the ballast stones and everything else. Then you had the lower deck where things were stored. Then you had the other decks where the crew was, and then all the way in the back was the captain's quarters. And it's very short. I'm only 5'1", and I just only had about that much room. Anybody else that walks around in there is kind of stooped over a little bit, especially on the third, on the next deck down.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on the boat, the deck where they had most of the cannons. And every time I got close to one of the cannons, I could actually smell gunpowder. And they don't shoot those things off. There's nothing. They have a fake one that they would set off periodically on the main deck. But you could actually smell gunpowder down there. And at one point, I actually smelled something that, to me, it smelled an awful lot like rotting meat. Not like human flesh or, like the flesh of a dead animal, but, really nasty smell, like if you left your chicken in the refrigerator for too long or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I kept looking around trying to figure out what that smell was. And then I realized, well, that probably was rotted meat. They didn't have refrigeration. They didn't have ice that they could pick up everywhere. The only thing they could do was to have dried meats and perhaps dried fruits or whatever, but it just smelled so bad, and it got me nauseated. Mm-hmm. And I had to go back up on the top deck to get some air. And while I was standing on the top deck, my husband was still walking around on the deck below. And I noticed this gentleman, he was a tour guide that was dressed in, I suppose the seaman outfit that he was wearing was more like that of around the Civil War rather than the Revolutionary War. Mm-hmm. With the white pants and the little hat, and he had, like stripes on his shirt and everything. And I noticed that he was looking at something beside him. He was constantly doing this, and he was turning around and looking behind himself. And I walked over to him and I said, "Excuse me, but you know this ship's haunted, don't you?" And he says, "Why do you think I'm looking around?" And he looked at me and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be rude like that. That was not my intention. It's just, I didn't know that you weren't being sarcastic." Mm-hmm. And I said, "No, I wasn't. I was being truthful." And he says, "Every time I'm up here and there's nobody else on the deck with me," he said, "there's always somebody standing here." And he says, every time I get close to the wheel, the steer wheel, he said, it's like they don't want me near it. Yes, Morgana. They don't want me near this wheel. And they make sure that I don't get near it. And he says, I don't like it. And I said, well, just tell them. Say, look, I'm not trying to bother the ship. I'm not trying to destroy it. I'm not trying to steer it. I'm not trying to set it off course. I'm not being disrespectful or anything. I'm here to tell people the story of the ship. I'm here to tell people the history of it. I said, all you have to do is just to explain to the spirits, I'm not here to be disrespectful. I'm here for a reason. I'm here to keep the story alive. I'm here to keep the story of the men alive, and that sort of thing. And he just looked down at me and he says, well, thank you for that. He says, I never thought of it that way. And just about that time, my husband came up on the deck, so I had to go meet up with him. But then the second time that I was there was some years later, about 15 years later. And I was walking around on the deck, and I noticed this gentleman dressed in what looked like Revolutionary War outfit. Just a regular sailor outfit, not an officer or anything, but just a regular sailor. And I looked over and I thought, well, he looked like he was grabbing lines, some of the rigging and everything, but yet it wasn't moving. The lines weren't.
She's gone again, but she will be back. She will be back. She threw some of the comments while we're waiting Tabby coming back. I do apologise, folk, for the interruptions, which she says she's having quite a few issues with her internet. So excuse me. So hi to everybody that came in a wee bit late. Tammy, Mark Johnson as well. Welcome, buddy. Harry's here as well. Mr. Cat was saying it's good for us to learn the history too. You're spot on, Mr. Cat. History is very important. You can't have the paranormal without the history. We all need to know basically where we came from, and as you go into castles, everybody likes to know the story behind the actual castles. And as I say, you can't have paranormal. You can't have one without the other. Martin, he was in the UK, by the way, so I love hearing about a little bit of history. We love hearing about the history as well, buddy. You think, oh, she's back again. They're back again.
Oh, there I am.
Misty said, think everyone's internet is being messed with. I was just going over some of the comments here.
I could hear you. You couldn't hear me, but I could hear you. I appreciate
it. So Mark saying he loves hearing about your little bit of history. He's in the UK, same as we are. And Mr. Cat saying that's what makes PI. So thank you very much, Mr. Cat. That's very nice, honey. Sarah and I have always said for day one, you can't have a history without the paranormal, and in other ways it just doesn't happen. So that's really nice of you, Mr. Cat. Thank you. And Mars West sells definitely. When I was saying about the paranormal and the history going side by side. So you're back again, Cat.
Yep. Well, I'm here. So I think I was explaining that I saw this gentleman pulling on what I thought was rigging, but yet the rigging wasn't moving. Nothing was moving, but I could see him going through the motions of grabbing something, and I just kept looking at him, and then suddenly it just dawned on me, I could see right through him. I wasn't looking at, because all I did was just glance over and I could see him, and then when I really focused on him, I realized I could see all the way through him. And I just walked over, very, very slowly walked over toward this person. And the closer I got to him, the more undefined. It was like a veil or something, a piece of filmy glass or something. And the closer I got to him, it became more distorted. And it's like having a close up on a camera, and it gets, it's like what my hands are doing. It gets
Aye, more fuzzy.
fuzzy and that sort of thing. So by the time I really got up close to him, um, he actually turned around and he looked at me, and he gave me this really gruff look, like, "What do you want?" type of thing. And I just got it in my head was, "Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I didn't mean to disrupt your work. I beg your pardon. That go ahead, carry on." So all I did was back up because I wanted to keep my eye on him. And he just turned around and started doing his rigging again. I was like, okay, it's your ship. You asked me to back off. So that's what I did.
I'll leave it to it. Do you think maybe some of these spirits, that you see in the ships, usually that one particular one was as if he was pulling the rigging, that maybe they pass away on the ship, maybe suddenly, accidentally, whatever, that they feel that they're still got a job to do, that they never actually completed their job, while they were alive. And so they still get this job that they must, kind of finish.
Yes, I think that's probably it. People that were on board those ships, especially back then, not all of them were volunteers. A lot of people on board naval ships at that period of time kind of got on board ship for a whole lot of other reasons. Either they didn't have any money and they figured, well, let's just make a little bit of money while I'm on ship, spend a certain amount of time, I'll get a certain amount of experience. Maybe when I get home, I can become a fisherman or use my money to invest in something. And then you had other people that were forced into becoming sailors for various different reasons, either to make up for debts, saying, hey, if you don't pay the debt, then you either have to come up with a whole lot of money, or I know somebody that needs somebody aboard a ship. So do it that way. Like conscript servants, so to speak, but under the guise of the US Navy. And a lot of these people never made it home. So for you to say that only certain people are aboard these ships, like the Constellation and the Constitution, which I'll just speak briefly about, that's the main one. It was called Old Ironsides. It's moored in Boston Harbor. It was built before the Constellation, and it received its name Old Ironsides because the U.S. Navy, not having a lot of ways and means of building a great number of ships, had to find a way to make them stronger and sturdier than the others around them. And they discovered that rather than just having straight up boards and planking for their hulls, which can get eaten up by barnacles and mollusks and worms and stuff like that, they finally got the bright idea to put metal plating on the ships to prevent that from happening. And they discovered that things like copper, which takes a long time for it to tarnish and eventually rust, they decided to put that on a lot of their ships. And the USS Constitution was just one of those ships. And it was the most popular at that time for its copper hull because the copper was actually forged and pounded out in the foundry from Paul Revere. And Paul Revere is one of our most famous people in our history for the Revolutionary War. And so he had a hand in helping to create the copper plating. Well, the Constitution was in a fight. And it was, let me see, Well, it was in a fight with a French ship, and the French were shooting at it with their cannon. And unfortunately, for the for the French, the way they had it aimed and as close as they were, the cannonballs were going at an angle to the point where they were hitting down below the area where the Constitution's cannon were, and they were literally just bouncing off the hull.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it had to do with how thick the planking was on that hull, but also because it had all of this copper that was down below. And the captain of the other ship says, "Well, we can't hurt it. Its hull must be made of iron." And
That's
so it was nicknamed Old Ironsides.
there's it. I was going to stick up a comment, just what you're saying about conscripting. The cruise, was that similar? Mark's saying about Shanghai. I've seen this in film. You see in films and what have you. People get knocked out, or they get, they get fed drink till they pass out and what have you. And then, as Mark says, they wind up in the middle of the sea, and obviously they've got not got much choice but to, stay there. Do you think a lot of that went on as well? Maybe.
I'm sure that it probably happened. I don't think being shanghaied to serve aboard naval ships happened as often. Serving aboard a naval vessel had a lot more prestige involved. So if you did manage to stick it out, if you served your time, if you rose up in the ranks, you had maybe a nice pension, or you got some rewards somewhere down the line, and all the pats on the back. And for some men, it had to do with the nice uniform and attracting the ladies. So if they could be in the Navy by choice, then that's what they did. But the conscript type of thing was mainly based on the fact that they had a debt to pay to somebody, and some people, some men ended up on board naval vessels because they were paid to take the place of someone else. Say the Navy called up a whole bunch of people and went from house to house and trying to say, "Okay, I'm going to take your eldest son and he's going to be on board the ship." Well, if that family was wealthy enough, instead of allowing that son to go off, they would pay a servant to take the place. I mean, they did that all the way up through the Civil War.
Right.
And so that's what they did. And so there were a lot of people that were on board these naval vessels that wanted to be there for various different reasons. And then there were a handful that weren't. So for the duty involved, the honor of serving aboard these ships, for many of them, that's the only real life they knew. Sometimes they joined the Navy at, age 14, 15, and they stayed in the service until they couldn't do it anymore, or, they just finally got sick of it and wanted to have a family and be a landlubber. So for these sailors aboard these old ships, sometimes that ship was their home. That's pretty much the only real life that they knew.
That's all the excuse me, that's all they knew. Misty Cat was saying, I think you're talking the Shanghai. Did in the UK, Misty Cat. I didn't know that, Misty Cat. But what I'll do is I'll look into that, because we've still got the next 2 days of lives to go on the ship subject. So I'm going to look into that, because I had no idea they'd done it in the UK.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I'm sure that it happened all over the world, because let's face it, if you've got a ship that has less than a stellar reputation, and you can't keep crew on a regular basis, you got to find them somewhere. And if you're making money, and you have that extra money to be able to throw it around, you're going to pay somebody to find you crew. That's where the Shanghaiing came in.
Happening on a pirate ship. Misty said, I think places like Cornwall. So, thanks for that, Misty. I'll have a wee look into that, Fleur, and I'll bring it up on one of the other lives, find out. There's more in the States, but yeah, all over the world. As you say, Kat, if there was a ship that didn't have a very good reputation, then obviously nobody would want to be on it, especially for months at an end. So, it's a case of just go and find me some bodies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care where you get them. I need a crew. And there's X amount, just go and find me them. And the easiest way would be to go to a local bar or pub, and see some drunk guys and fill them with drink till they pass out and throw them on a boat.
Yep.
They don't have any choice after it, They're in the middle of the Pacific, the Atlantic, wherever it is. And which one you can't exactly say, I want off. Well, you could say I want off, but it wouldn't exactly be ideal. I mean,
no, probably the worst Shanghaiing took place out on the west coast of the United States, especially up around Upper California, Oregon, Washington, but mostly in California, as they refer to it as the Barbary Coast. And they referred to it as being Shanghaied because most of the trade and everything was going over to China. There were so many ships that were going back and forth from the west coast of the United States to China. And they were constantly being set on by pirates. All the way well up until the early 1900s, they were constantly being raided by pirates off of that area. And so most people didn't want to serve on board those ships because it scared the dickens out of them. They didn't want to take the risk of not coming back. Mm-hmm. And also, most people that owned ships back then, moguls that had tons of money, they put very little into the ships themselves. They didn't want to buy and build good ships. They wanted the cheapest ships they could buy and pay their crew as little as possible so that they could get more profits. So for most people, it wasn't profitable, especially with their lives, mm-hmm. to have anything to do with these boats and these ships. So the only way that a lot of these captains could get people to man their ships to go back and forth from the mainland to China was to, get them by force or by trickery, or probably another one that they used to use was gambling. People would gamble, they would start losing a lot of money, and they'd say, okay, well, you know how you can pay off your debt? Be on board the ship. And that's the way they did it. But for those unfortunates that, they came into town looking for something else, the next thing you know, they're, like you said, they're being drugged, they're being drunked, they're being bonked over the head in alleyways, and the next thing you know, they're waking up getting seasick, hundreds of miles away, and the only thing they can do is work until they get back home. Fortunately, if they get back home.
If they get back home, Mrs. saying sounds like modern day entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Indeed.
The more money, the better, and to hell with whoever makes it for you.
Yep.
So
ships like the Constellation and the Constitution, and there's quite a number of other ships that are moored around here, like the USS which is a submarine that's also in Baltimore Harbor. It served in World War II. The USS Wisconsin, which served briefly in World War II, but also in the Korean War. It's moored at Norfolk, Virginia. All of those ships are reputed to be haunted. And you just don't really know where the stories are real, what's the truth. But let's face it, especially a warship, you're going to have spirits on those ships. You can't help it. What they saw during battle, the horrible, horrendous things. I mean, my goodness, you get cannonballs or mortar lobbed at you, and you see people literally just blown into pieces by these cannonballs and shrapnel and everything. Those that made it back, it's got to take its toll on. And, for those that ended up being aboard those ships that really didn't want to be, that was the most horrendous things in the world. I'm being beset upon by cats here. That's Finbar. Finbar McCool. That's Finbar McCool back here. But I think that's why a lot of spirits are on board ships, is because of the trauma, the horror, and then again, the fact that they were on board those ships because that was their lives, and they didn't want to leave.
Freaky saying he likes the living pillow on the chair.
Yeah, that's Finn. Hi, Finbar.
That one looks like my poor dead Chloe. Love him. Marky said something similar to what you just said there, Kat. So then people that happen to no wonder they come back and haunt. You think maybe another reason that they haunt on 2 seconds. Sometimes I get carried away with this wee clicky thing. Another reason maybe they haunt is because maybe in their mind it's maybe a way for them, they're thinking they can maybe get back home.
That is a good possibility. Let's face it, you can go into a location that is reputed to be haunted, and one person might interpret why that spirit is there, saying, oh, well, they're just attached to the place. They just don't want to leave, that sort of thing. And then you have somebody else that comes in and actually really does try to communicate with them rather than just assuming something. And they find out that the reason that spirit is there is that they don't know how to find their way. They don't know how to leave. They don't know how to be with their loved ones. They're not sure. And nobody's bothered to show them the door. So you do what you can to try and help them out.
Exactly.
You have to be respectful.
That to me, that's I'm quite big on that 1 point. Respect. You need to respect the spirits, and as you say, assuming there's far too many people out there that just assume stuff. About certain spirits, maybe whether it's a castle or a graveyard, whatever. They just assume and they just roll with it, and it turns out it's a load of mumble. I don't think we ever really know the reason why they're there, no less than the spirit tells you direct, but there's too much assumption going on. In my mind, tells a lady in here she must be trapped, she maybe lost a child, she's looking for the child, blah, 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 and it may not be true at all, I have a question for you there, for Freaky. I'll just stick it up. Do you think the ship from the Philadelphia experiment is haunted?
Oh, you mean the USS Eldridge? Oh, I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that at all. Some of the men that died aboard that ship, especially during the so-called Philadelphia experiment, I would actually like to go there and check it out, but I don't think they let people on there to look around. But yeah, I don't doubt that at all.
Must you see, that's sad.
Yeah, it is. It is very sad, especially if they died the way it's claimed that they died during that experiment, which is kind of interesting because I only just recently found out that Nikola Tesla was involved with the Philadelphia experiment. I didn't know that. I'd heard so much about that incident, but I didn't know he had anything to do with it. But he did. And it doesn't surprise me. He had his fingers in so much other things, so why not? He shouldn't be just well known for all the cars that are out there.
I'll put my hands up, I might be making an idiot myself. I always believe in being honest. I don't actually know much about the Philadelphia experiment. I know I might be shooting myself in the head here, but I'm not going to sit and, give opinions on something I don't know anything about. So, I dare say
it was cool. You really ought to read up on it because it's a fascinating subject. And don't watch the movie. Don't take the movie out. The one that it's based on. Don't watch that. No. Don't watch the movie. Read the book and read the real thing.
I'll read up on it. As I say, I don't believe in mumbling on about something I don't know about, so it's better just to put your hands up and say, look, I don't know. The spirit, we've done this quite a few times, Mark. The spirit says like we do, or stay the same age as they die, as I've seen things I can't work out. It's a
good. Think I want to? If I die right now, do you think I want to die with this face? No. I want to look like I did when I was about 30.
Well, that's
I think we really do. I think we actually sometimes have a choice. Because let's face it, if we didn't have a choice on how we showed ourselves to the living, then, oh my God, every time I walked out onto a battlefield in my area, I wouldn't be able to stand it because all I would be seeing would be body parts.
Mm-hmm.
I that isn't the way I see them. I see them whole. I see the soldiers whole. And I might get an impression that they were hurting or, maybe have been wounded or something. But no, I think you have a choice because I was on an investigation once where a husband and wife had lived in this location for something like 50 years. And they died within like 6 months of each other. One of them, the male died in the house, and the wife died in a nursing home, but 6 months within each other. But when I saw them in that house, they showed themselves to me when they were married back in the 1930s. And I think it was because it was the happiest time of their lives. It's when they had just moved into that house. And it just seemed right for them to show themselves in one of their happier times rather than as two old people. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes we do have a choice. It just might be that the spirits that sometimes show up that are just an imprint, I don't think that they have much of a choice as to how we see them or perceive them. They might not have that choice because they're just so traumatized that they don't know how to change that appearance. But then there's others that do it. I mean, I don't know how many of you have seen the old black and white version of the Canterville Ghost with Robert Young and Charles Lawton as the ghost. The Canterville Ghost, who was an intelligent spirit, he would show up dressed in all kinds of costumes. He would show up in all kinds of different forms. Mm-hmm. He would show up as a dog, or he would show up, with his head cut off, or, hanging or something like that. He chose on how he was seen by the people over time. And I think that's the case. I really do.
I think as well, I've heard it many a time that we get the choice to get back to the age or the time that we were most happy. I've read numerous stories with people, who, maybe their grandfathers passed and he was maybe in his 80s, for example. But these people have seen him when he was a young man or 30, 20, 30, healthy and full of colour. I know that sounds daft, but he always happy, he always contented because that's the time that he was most happiest. I've heard that quite a few times. And I do another thing about spirits aging. To me, aging's a physical thing.
Yes.
It's your body that ages, and obviously when you pass over, you're no longer physical. So the aging bit, it's just my opinion, no disrespect to anybody else's views. Aging is a physical thing. So after you pass, I wouldn't say you age. I would say you get the option to go back to when you were most happiest, whether it be a year, an age, whatever. Just my opinion. There's Mark saying, I don't know if you've ever seen this program, Kat?
Oh my goodness. Oh, Mark, you and I ought to get together. Oh, I have the entire set of videos I used to watch it when it first came out years ago. And when they finally came out with it, I got the whole set. And I laughed my head off at that. It's just absolutely hilarious. They really should make a remake of it, but not here in the States. They ought to make another British version of it because the Americans, I'm sorry, they would screw it up. Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. I loved it. Now, here in the States, it was called My Partner the Ghost. It wasn't called Randall and Hopkirk Deceased. It was called My Partner the Ghost. And, oh, yeah. Anybody that has never seen it, you've got to check it out. It's hilarious. And it really makes an awful lot of sense. A lot of the things that happen in that, it's not just a comedy, it's not just a mystery, but it delves into the paranormal as well. So, off topic. I'm sorry. I just love that show. It was
Well,
hilarious.
I mean, that's you know that's part of what this channel's about. And sometimes we'll have a specific topic we want to talk about, but then sometimes you go off topic because somebody's got a comment up or one of the panel said something and it's triggered a thought. I think
yeah.
it'd be better live just to laid back, and you're still talking about the haunted ships, but an extra wee bit here and there, it makes it all the more better. Freaky Geek saying it was a TV show, Freaky. I remember as well. I used to watch it as well. The guy with the white suit on. It was a TV show back in I think it was the 70s. Am I right?
Late 60s, early 70s, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. It was never made into a movie that I'm aware of.
It would be. It would be good if you did a movie of it. There's Mark saying, sorry if I changed it. No problem, Mark. It just says, we're quite open here, and, if somebody brings up a comment or a subject, and we'll gladly talk about it, but, we still stay on the subject that we're on anyway, but, we can veer off sometimes, but it makes it a lot more fun. But I remember that's the thing about TV, but there's a lot of TV programs out there that a few years back, and they just don't make stuff like that anymore. Cat's right. Guy who played Jeff died years ago.
Yeah.
Mark, you never know when a topic needs changing.
Not sure how to take that.
That's freaky. Freaky's all right. Sometimes some of these comments are a wee bit out there. I mean that with total respect, Freaky. I really do, buddy. He's funny, it's quite funny. But not to say on here, we've been off topic quite a few times, and it makes for a better life sometimes. But we always tend to get back on track. Kat, what was that ship? I don't know if you could call it a ship. It was just made totally of iron. I remember.
Oh, you mean the Monitor and the Merrimack during the Civil War? Is that what you're referring to?
I remember seeing a documentary about it a long time ago, and it was just made of iron, and it had the gun ports, every so often along the sides.
Yeah, those are what were known as ironclads. They were first designed, believe it or not, by Leonardo da Vinci, but they came out. They were designed and first used just prior to the Civil War. They thought that it would be best to have a ship that you couldn't just blast out of the water so easily. And both the Union and the Confederate armies, or navies rather, developed them. Mm-hmm. And they had a number of different ironclads, but probably the two most popular here in the United States was the battle between the Merrimack and the Monitor. And it's just the fact that being made out of mostly iron and everything, they kept lobbing mortars at each other, and they were bouncing off, and it finally was kind of like a stalemate and everything. But it was the forerunner of naval warfare and making ships more out of metal rather than out of wood. They also started learning about the processes of using submarines, which also Leonardo da Vinci originated. And the first submarine was used during the Civil War. Unfortunately, those people never made it back. They literally attached a mortar to a pole, attached it to a ship in the harbor, but unfortunately, they were probably overcome by carbon monoxide because the air wasn't being filtered. They never made it back to shore. They only found it a few years ago, and every crewman was still at their station. And you could tell that all they had done was just fallen asleep. So those sailors were buried, and I'm sure that if it came down to it, that ship has got to be haunted. There's just no doubt about that one. It's got to be haunted. So I'm sure that wherever that the ship is still in the process of being restored, I'm sure people have got some hellacious stories to talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. Freaky, so you missed the start of a chat. Do you have any video evidence to go with your tales? But it's all documented, Cat, is that right? It's just documented?
Which ones? The one with the submarine? Or all of them?
The start. Angelina, as I watched documentary on the USS Arizona, have you been to the memorial site and did you pick up anything?
Oh, when I hit the lottery, I'm going to Hawaii. Yeah, when I hit the lottery, I'm going to Hawaii, and I will visit the USS Arizona Memorial. And I'm sure that I probably will. Actually, I don't really think I'm going to go there. There's some sadness that I really don't want to feel.
Freaky's saying it's anything that you've mentioned. Is there any video evidence to back
I'm
up?
sure that there are documentaries and so forth about all three of the, or any of the ships that I've mentioned, the USS Constellation, the USS Constitution, the USS Wisconsin, which is in Norfolk, the USS Eldridge, which was involved in the Philadelphia project, or Philadelphia experiment, and of course the USS Arizona. There's a lot of documentaries out, and you can look them up on the internet, anywhere. And anyone that gets an opportunity to visit the East Coast here of the United States, all along the coast, there are naval stations, there are museum areas, there are harbors that have absolutely incredibly beautiful ships. A lot of them have been lovingly restored. Many of them you can go on to. And for people that are interested in the paranormal, I'm sure you're going to pick up something. No doubt.
Definitely. So I think we'll wind it up there for tonight, Kat, if that's all right with you, Fleur.
Okay.
So just before we go, for those that missed the start here, I'm going to put up a video again, Kat, if that's all right. You don't mind. Just for anybody that missed the start of it, we've got a wee new video we're going to start attaching to the start every live. Sarah made up this afternoon. So I'm going to stick it on for whoever missed it earlier on. Oh, right, wait a minute. There's a clock. 2 seconds. I got to go being great here. I'll come back, let me know. But Matt, we're next on tomorrow, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We're back on then, buddy, with the Mary Celeste.
Thanks for bringing up the memory about the show, Mark. Thank you.
Rando and Hop Cup. So here's the video just before we pop off. Right, the video just to see my work. So that was the main reason I played is because I'm curious to know how many people actually jumped. I mean, Freaky is going to be just the intro to all the lives. We're going to put it at the start of the lives. So thanks very much, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Kat, for your stories tonight. I'll just hang on to you for a wee second or two, though, after we come off. Thanks, everybody, for coming in the chat, for your comments. And we're back tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the afternoon with Karen Perkins, who's going to be talking all about the Mary Celeste. So hopefully we'll see you all again then. So everybody take care and stay safe for now. Thanks. Bye.
Night, everybody.